Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse from Astrology, and in this recording I'm going to be looking at the astrology of March 2022. So then, as we come into March, we have a new moon. That is the first event of the month. So we have a new moon in Pisces. So we're in Pisces season as we enter March. And there's going to be a new moon at 12 degrees of Pisces, which is also going to be conjunct Jupiter. And there's a very wide conjunction to Neptune technically as well. We could just say it's skirting the edges really. But still, it's a super oceanic Pisces energy from this new moon. And with the new moon being in Pisces, it means that we have some kind of new start, which is centered around perhaps our spirituality. Pisces is a sign associated with our spirituality. It is also connected with the unconscious, the invisible worlds, and it feels like this is quite all-encompassing at the moment, and maybe there is a very strong sense of perhaps searching for faith, searching for something or someone to believe in with the conjunction to Jupiter in particular. There is a really nice connection to Uranus from this new moon as well. So Uranus, currently going through Taurus, sometimes has been feeling a little bit unsettling because Taurus is everything that is constant and just the same, but Uranus has been radically shifting everything for us, shifting the very ground it seems that we are standing upon. And yeah, maybe we've been feeling a little bit anxious about the future, but something about this pattern with the new moon conjunct Jupiter, the sextile to Uranus in Taurus, makes me feel like we're kind of finding our feet almost. We're finding some semblance of, now I'm starting to see the bigger picture. So even if things are still a little bit unsettled, I recognize that there is a bigger picture to all of this. There's a little bit of background tension in this chart because this new moon will make a semi-square to all the planets that are in Capricorn. We've actually got a quadruple conjunction going on in Capricorn. We have Mars conjunct Pluto, conjunct Venus, conjunct Vesta. So Vesta, Venus, Mars, Pluto, all sitting there on the 27th degree. Vesta is actually on the 26th degree at the new moon. But still, we've got a definite hotspot going on in Capricorn, all gathered around Pluto. So we've had this very long story with Venus conjunct Pluto 3 times. We had Mercury conjunct Pluto 3 times as well. And so it kind of feels like we've been prepared, or we are being prepared for all of the massive changes in structure, in the institutions, in the governments, in the halls of power. There are huge changes happening. And yes, that is quite intense. And certainly with Mars coming up to meet Pluto, the exact date of that is going to be on the 3rd of March. So we get the new moon in Pisces on the 2nd of March. Mars conjunct Pluto is on the 3rd of March. Venus conjunct Pluto is on the 3rd of March. So they're all kind of sitting there together. And we feel this sense that we know now that things are changing. And maybe as well, we're perhaps at times feeling a little bit frustrated with Mars and Pluto together is quite a formidable duo. And positively, working positively, this can be a real force for change. It's a goal. Mars, we are formulating goals to change things, to transform things, to eradicate what we don't need. It's very go-getting. And with Venus there, perhaps Venus is just tempering that go-getting energy. And perhaps we need that because the shadow of Mars conjunct Pluto can be very angry, can be very aggressive. So I think it's helpful that we have Venus there, who is just offering the idea that even if things are very potently intense around this time, that maybe it would be better if we can look for harmony rather than try to force the point that we believe in, or to force the situation that we're in. Venus is really asking us to try to change things from a place of love. Venus conjunct Pluto is the power of love. So that is in itself incredibly powerful. And just with Vesta being there, Vesta increases focus. So this is why, even though this quadruple conjunction is only in a semi-square to the new moon, it really does speak quite loudly. On the 5th of March, the Sun and Jupiter will perfect their conjunction. So this is a yearly transit. We experience it once a year. So this is the time of year for us to think about these themes of Jupiter. So Jupiter is all about expansion, opportunity, luck, abundance, joy. So when the Sun meets Jupiter, firstly, it's a good time to consider, how can I make my life bigger and better? Where do I need to maybe stretch myself a little bit? Sometimes when we get this transit, we are thinking about holidays, perhaps thinking with summer, those of us in the Northern Hemisphere anyway, we're thinking about summer coming and where we can go. And obviously things are a little bit more relaxed in some places as far as travel is concerned. So yeah, maybe we're wanting to literally go to other places. Jupiter rules international travel. And as I mentioned with the new moon, Jupiter can also be about faith and belief as well. So maybe this is also a time to consider, what is it that I believe in? What do I believe about myself? How can I create more joy in my life? All those kinds of things start to come in with the Sun conjunct Jupiter. We then have Mars moving into Aquarius. This is going to be on the 6th of March. There's a lot of movements at the early part of the month in March. So Mars will move into Aquarius, and this is going to activate Aquarius themes. So the themes associated with Aquarius, and we're looking at the global 11th house, are all to do with freedom, liberation, politics, the idea of society and our connection with one another. It's us as the group. So clearly we've obviously had a lot of issues that are around matters connected with freedom. Right now, as I'm speaking, I'm actually making this recording very early in February, 7th of February. So the truckers in Canada are making a lot of news right now. So it might be that some of those kinds of themes are also in play. They're being more talked about. But Mars going into Aquarius also fuels us. It fuels us with a desire to kind of chase goals for the future, because Aquarius is about the future. It motivates us to make connections with one another, although because it's Mars, we do have to bear in mind that sometimes Mars can be a little bit headstrong and sometimes can be more aggressive rather than assertive. So we do need to be mindful of how we are making connections. It's great for networking. Mars in Aquarius is excellent for that, and really having the initiative for teamwork. It can work very well for teamwork, but again, we have to be mindful of that Martian energy, which is sometimes a bit my way or the highway kind of thing. So Mars in Aquarius will push us to open some new doors, to invite in some new opportunities, especially in the house where we have Aquarius in our natal chart. Things are going to pick up in that part of life. That's what happens when Mars enters a new house in our personal chart. Things start to get busy there. We become more animated because Mars is stimulating the themes of that house. And we get active. We realize that we've got a lot of stuff to do here, because Mars is always the one who wants to be doing something. He likes to have a goal. So Mars moves into Aquarius, but then so does Venus, and it's actually on the same day as well. So Mars moves into Aquarius 6th of March, Venus moves into Aquarius on the 6th of March, and as they move into Aquarius, they actually form a conjunction. This is the last of 3 conjunctions that actually started last year, and because of Venus retrograde, they have had these extra meetings, and they've actually been in a conjunction, in the orb of a conjunction, since January, since the end of January. So it's a really long period of time. They will stay hanging out with one another until April the 8th, if I remember rightly. So it is a very long conjunction that has been really asking us all the time to look at what is going on in our heart and how we can take action on that. So Venus going into Aquarius, again, we get the idea of a little bit of tempering. Mars is the temper, losing our temper. So again, if we go back to the issues of Aquarius, the desire for freedom, innovation, change, progress, liberation, all that kind of stuff, Mars is gunning for that. He's pushing for all of that. And then Venus comes along and says, hey, we're all friends here, aren't we? And let's see if we can try to get along with one another. So this is why it's a helpful influence. It just dials it down a notch. So I think we might find that quite helpful to have both Venus and Mars in Aquarius. Venus in Aquarius, generally speaking, just switches how we are engaging with one another. It changes the atmosphere around relationships. And because it is Aquarius energy, then what we tend to find is in relationships, we enjoy having a bit more space. So it's important in our personal relationships to give one another space to grow, especially with Mars, very independent Mars being there, because if people don't feel like they have the space, if we're feeling crowded, then that's when tempers can flare. So giving one another space just to experiment with life and, explore new things. It can be really helpful in relationships to have new experiences with one another, just again to give us room for growth and something new to talk about, something new to connect over. So Venus in Aquarius can push us in those directions. With Venus and Mars going into Aquarius, it does mean that we now have 5 bodies over there in Aquarius. So Venus, Mars, Juno, Saturn, and Mercury. Now, Mercury will move out of Aquarius. That's going to be on the 10th of March, and he'll move into Pisces. But on the same day, Vesta is going to move into Aquarius. So we still have a lot of emphasis on these matters to do with freedom, liberation, groups, society, and the idea of progress and the future. So there's still a lot of concentration there. But mentally, Mercury moving into Pisces on the 10th of March, we start to think in a different way. We start to communicate in a different way. Pisces energy, I was saying earlier on with the new moon in Pisces, this is a very spiritual sign. It's a water sign. It's a very emotional sign. It's a super sensitive sign. So if we put all of that together, this means that our style of communication, Mercury, becomes more sensitive, Pisces, more empathic, kinder, more compassionate. The challenge with Mercury in Pisces, so the flip side, the shadow side, is that sometimes communication can get a little bit muddled. It gets a bit muddled because Pisces is 2 fish swimming in opposite directions, and we can lose our thread. We can forget to reply to the text or reply to the email. We can forget the time that we arranged to meet someone. So things can become somewhat confusing when Mercury goes into Pisces if we are unaware. If we're mindful and if we use that Pisces energy in a constructive way, then this can be a really nice period for talking to one another, and things like meditation, that's ideal for Mercury in Pisces, or journaling, writing stories, maybe just taking a bit of time out, going for a walk to rest your mind. Sometimes, especially because we had a retrograde, Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, then it went back into Capricorn and was retrograding back through Capricorn. So we've had it's like we've had a lot of thinking to do. We've had a lot of thinking, a lot of reviewing, a lot of looking back. It's all been a lot of head stuff with Mercury in Aquarius particularly, but even with Mercury in Capricorn. Capricorn is all about the real world and, grim reality. So Mercury going into Pisces, I think it will really help to rest our minds. We can allow our minds to rest. It's a great time for watching movies, just to chill out, to let your mind just wander. Sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we need to have a bit of daydream time. And Mercury in Pisces is ideal for that. On the 13th of March, asteroid Hygeia will station retrograde. She will station retrograde at 14 degrees of Scorpio. So Hygeia is a goddess of hygiene. So that's where the word comes from. Hygiene, cleanliness, preventative medicine, or just actions that are preventative of problems. Hygeia is basically going through a deep clean whilst going through Scorpio. So collectively, we are going through this deep clean process because Scorpio, especially with the South Node now in Scorpio, is where we need to be doing some letting go. It's a sign associated with elimination, with trash, with getting rid of things and release. And Scorpio is also associated with our fears. It's our inner demons. So we've got a lot of work to do here anyway, with the South Node being in Scorpio. But Hygeia is kind of helping the process along and really getting into the stuff that's here and cleaning it all out. Now with Hygeia's retrograde motion, the first thing is that we may feel as though we're starting to go over some old ground. We thought we'd cleared this out. We thought we'd done the healing, but for some reason, something else now is bubbling up from deep within the unconscious. Again, it could be fears. It could be matters around the idea of power and control. There might be some toxicity around those kinds of relationships with others, again, associated with power and control. So Hygeia is going to intensify this already intense journey by going retrograde. She's going to come back over this old ground, and we're starting to revisit stuff that perhaps began to come up around the end of last year. It was about the 26th of December when she went into Scorpio, first and foremost. So we're starting to revisit some of these matters, but all of this deep work is really important because of this South Node journey through Scorpio as well. And in fact, because of Hygeia's retrograde in Scorpio, she's actually going to be in this sign right up until October. So for the majority of the year, Hygeia is working away really hard in this sign of Scorpio. She'll actually meet the South Node around August time. So that is the time when we'll really begin to see what we need to fully release and let go of. Now, a symbolic way that we could think about this journey of Hygeia through Scorpio and the retrograde period is to think about a snake shedding its skin. Hygeia was actually the daughter of Asclepius, and Asclepius was gifted with great wisdom, kind of like secret knowledge of healing and resurrection. This was because he once did a great kindness, and so a snake licked him on the ear and gifted him with all this wisdom. And so this snake medicine was also passed down to Hygeia. And in fact, the bowl of Hygeia, which is still used by pharmacies today, a symbol for pharmacies, shows a snake coming up out of a bowl. So think of the snake shedding its skin. When it goes through that process, it is somewhat vulnerable. And so that is maybe how we feel during this time as Hygeia goes backwards. We feel perhaps that not everything is in our control and we just feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's really necessary for our growth. So we have to get rid of this old skin in order for us to grow and to heal and to release what is no longer necessary for us, no longer working for us. Now, on the same day as Hygeia stationing retrograde, we're also going to have the Sun's yearly conjunction to Neptune. So I really think this does accentuate the feeling of perhaps a little bit of vulnerability, because the Sun conjunct Neptune is extremely soft and sensitive, and we can feel very much as though everything is very open, like we're picking up everything that is within the ether. And in fact, often this is a time when we feel like we need to withdraw from the world, like the world out there feels a bit too much, a bit too noisy, a bit too intense, especially given that Mars is currently going through Aquarius, and there's all that action going on in Aquarius, which is the house of people. And then we get the Sun conjunct Neptune. It's like it's all got too peoply out there. I need to have some time by myself, or just some time to be quiet. And we need to just really get into what am I feeling here? What is my soul telling me? We start to be much more conscious of our intuition, our imagination. We could find ourselves daydreaming more. I mentioned that with Mercury going into Pisces as well. So it's super daydreamy kind of energy. And maybe sometimes we feel a little bit overwhelmed and lost, and a sense of even sometimes disillusion or disappointment, because Neptune is so ethereal and so wondrous and so full of miracles. And sometimes, of course, life is not like that. And we get this feeling that there's all this wondrous possibility, Neptune, but life itself is vastly different from that perfection of the gods, which Neptune can represent. So we need to be aware that this energy is in play, especially with Hygeia going retrograde as well, and the vulnerability that comes up from that particular movement. And then this super sensitive atmosphere. It's like we want to be wrapped up in blankets, you know. It's a little bit like build a blanket fort on this date and just hide out, you know, hide out in there. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we need to just allow ourselves to be, you know, to cry if we need to. That's a healthy way of channeling some of these feelings, because a lot of the time we hold on to all those feelings. We think, oh, I've got to go to work, I've got to go to this meeting, I've got to get stuff done, look after the kids. We get very focused on the practical stuff and our responsibilities. I'm kind of talking Capricorn energy here. But we need to actually have time to process some of those deep feelings that come up sometimes, and just to get back in touch with what our soul is saying to us. And that might mean that we need to cleanse ourselves of some of the feelings that have come up. So crying is an absolutely perfect way of connecting with the Sun conjunct Neptune. Other ways we can connect with the Sun conjunct Neptune is to really honor that wonderful, imaginative energy of Neptune. So we could get super creative. In fact, the Sun is a representation of God, or the source of life, because we wouldn't be here without the Sun. So Sun conjunct Neptune reminds us that we are co-creators with life. And so whatever it is you are dreaming of now, whatever it is that you are hoping for, wishing for, there's a little seed idea that's coming through here. And from there, the question is, how are you going to bring this into being? Now, many of those themes are brought into the full moon. So we're going to have a full moon in Virgo, which will be on the 18th of March. And the full moon is going to be opposite to the Sun, as it always is at full moons. It's opposite to the Sun, but it's also going to be widely opposite to Neptune as well. And we do have a big gathering over there in Pisces with Mercury, Jupiter, Neptune, and the Sun all in Pisces. So the moon in Virgo, the opposite sign, is really focused on how can I be of service, how can I make things better, how can I help, but it feels overwhelming with all of that energy in Pisces. Virgo is very, very organized, whereas Pisces, Neptune particularly here, is disorganized. Pisces is all about the perfection of the universe. Virgo is about human frailty and how we really try to make things as perfect as we can. But there's always things that go wrong sometimes. We can't always prepare for every single eventuality, even though Virgo really tries. So we might be very caught up in this idea of this is how things should be, how things could be, but I'm struggling with the little picture. I'm struggling with all the details. I'm struggling with maybe even feeling that this is a drop in the ocean. The thing that I'm trying to do that is helpful, maybe it's a tiny drop in the ocean compared to what needs to be done. So that's where the overwhelm is. And yet this moon is very well supported by Pluto and by Sedna. So we've actually got a grand trine pattern happening here with Pluto and Sedna in a close trine. So they're both on 28 degrees of their signs. And then the moon is at 27 degrees of Virgo. So we do have some very earthy, grounded energy to support us, even though things might seem as though they're quite slippery, even though it feels like there's so much that needs to be done. Pluto in particular just says, let's focus on what can be done, what is in our control. That's where we can make the tiniest bit of difference. And it also reminds us that everything that we do is part of the evolving changes that are happening, especially with Sedna. Sedna reminds us that change is super slow. So we can't think that what we're doing is not making a difference. I think that's the most important thing, because Virgo really wants to see some kind of tangible results for the efforts that it's putting in. But healing takes time, and change takes time. So if we can allow for that, then that can help mediate some of these feelings at times that maybe we're not doing enough or we're not doing it right. There's an issue sometimes with Virgo that we can get very fixed on how things should be, where there's a perfectionist nature to Virgo. And perfectionism, much as it can make things look beautiful, it also can be incredibly stressful and stress-making, because we're trying to live up to some kind of false ideal. And it's important that we remember that we are just human, and that is enough. It is enough just to be here, to be human, to be of service, to be wanting to help, to be trying to do what we can. We can't do any more than that. On the 20th of March, the sun will enter Aries. So this is the beginning of a new astrological year. It is International Astrology Day, so really good day to spend time looking at your chart. It is spring equinox in the Northern Hemisphere. It's the pagan festival of Ostara. So it is a very important date in the astrological calendar. And the sign Aries is all about beginnings, because we are at the beginning of the zodiac again. It is a fire sign, so we've got a very significant change in the energetic signature. We've come from all of this watery stuff in Pisces. Now we're into cardinal, which is very active, fire. And fire, if you think of the flames of a fire, they are constantly moving. That's how Aries energy is. Aries is an upstart. Aries is the beginning. It's the flowers pushing through concrete to reach the sun. It is a strong, forceful, courageous, confident sign. And it asks us to inhabit those kinds of qualities, to be assertive, to be confident, to push forward with our ideas, to be independent, to be passionate about life. So when the sun goes into Aries, it really activates us. It encourages us to get active, even if that means going for a run or for a walk in the park, whatever it is that we can physically do. It is about getting the body moving, the blood pumping. It is about being spontaneous, although we do have to guard against being impulsive. Now that's going to be even more accentuated because Mars is going to move into square Uranus. So it'll first make a sextile to Chiron on the 21st of March. Now that can be really good for activating, healing, having the courage to heal. But Mars square to Uranus on the 22nd of March, that brings in an unpredictable element. That's Uranus. The unpredictability of Uranus can make Mars react in ways that are impulsive, or we can overreact to things because we're filled with this very jumpy, static, electric kind of anxiety. And we're likely to find that the things that we do in response to unpredictable elements in our lives, they also have unpredictable consequences as well. So the actions we take, Mars, have unpredictable consequences, Uranus, because they are square to one another. We've also once again got the themes of fighting for Mars, fighting for freedom, Uranus, or fighting for change, fighting for liberation, fighting for the group, fighting around politics again. So there's something very edgy that's going on here, and we could feel forced into a corner. And if we feel forced into a corner, Mars wants to come out all guns blazing. But again, those bullets from the gun, if we can't carry on with the symbolism, they might be going off in unexpected directions. So we have to be careful. We have to be careful with this kind of energy. It is the energy that's often more associated with things like accidents, because we're not really looking at where we're going, and because there are things that are unforeseeable and unpredictable happening here. So the most important thing is to slow down, because Mars always wants to move quickly, and the sun is in Aries, and we're speeding things up. We want everything to be happening faster. But if we slow down, then that will give us much more of an opportunity to be able to navigate some of these more unpredictable elements that are coming in with Mars square to Uranus. Moving towards the end of the month on the 27th of March, Mercury will also enter Aries, joining the Sun. And Mercury going into Aries once again changes the mental state. It changes the way that we think. It changes the way that we communicate. So generally speaking, our thinking speeds up in Aries. So that can be really useful sometimes, because sometimes we need to give a quick response to other people, or we just can think on our feet more easily with Mercury being in Aries. But we also just need to be mindful of how we are speaking to one another, because it's good for having a quick catch up and, getting to the point quickly. That's great. But sometimes Mercury in Aries can be slightly more forceful in its communication than intended. It can be a bit more blunt. Words can be used as weapons when Mercury is in Aries. So we just need to be mindful of that kind of expression of Mercury in Aries. On the 28th of March, we're going to have a triple conjunction between Venus, Saturn, and Juno. So Juno is an asteroid associated with marriage and contracts. Venus is associated with relationships and kind of what we love, what we're attracted to. And then Saturn is a planet that is associated with things that are long-term, that are mature. So we've got a lot of questions perhaps coming up about how committed we are to our relationships. That might be our personal one-to-one relationships, romantic relationships. It might be speaking of our commitment to our friendship group, our social group. And it even might be speaking about whose side do we feel like we're on when it comes to the group, the wider community. And there might be something here about the responsibilities that we have to one another, with Venus, Saturn, and Juno being in a conjunction as well. And then Venus will go on to square the nodes, so squaring the nodal axis on the 30th of March. And this is just as Neptune is forming a sextile to the North Node on the 29th of March. So we've got a lot of activation of the nodal axis. So Venus square to the nodes. Let's just take that to start with. Venus in Aquarius, as I was saying earlier, is about the love of freedom, the love of community, the love of the wider social community, the love of friends. It also speaks about harmony, Venus, in society. Any planet that is square to the nodes, it tells us there is some kind of missed step. There's something that we need to do so that we can turn a corner in our evolution, so that we can push towards that North Node. Remembering the North Node is actually ruled by Venus at the moment as well, because it's in the sign of Taurus. North Node in Taurus tells us that we are being encouraged to move towards the idea of looking at our resources. We need to really focus on our security, focus on our survival, focus on earthly material matters. We need to focus on the earth herself. In the sign of Taurus, we need to be looking at agriculture. We need to be looking at money matters, and even deeper than that, our values. What is truly valuable in this world? So Venus in Aquarius is saying we need to find some kind of harmony in society so that we can move towards this security for the future and really coming together as far as our values are concerned. So finding some harmony in society is important. Maybe it's also about diplomacy as well, being diplomatic, because Aquarius is the sign that speaks of differences. We are, of course, all unique. We are all different. We don't all believe the same things or think the same things. But somehow Venus is saying we've got to find some common ground. And that is what Neptune is also accentuating. Neptune sextile to the North Node. Neptune in Pisces, compassionate, soulful Pisces, is saying we are more alike than we are different. And that's something that we often forget, especially, in these times where things have been very fraught and we have got very, very divided, especially while the North Node was in Gemini. We've got very divided. So Neptune sextile to the North Node says this is an opportunity for us to advance when we realize that we are all from the same source. We are all star stuff. We all are connected to the cosmos. We are all connected to one another. There is no separation between us. Venus in Aquarius, I was talking before about how she likes her space, but Neptune in Pisces says that's all well and good, but we are not separate. We are all connected. And if we remember that we are all connected, that will help to open that gateway for us to evolve, for us to feel more secure, more grounded, more together as a community, as a collective. This concludes my reading for March 2022. If you enjoy my work and you would like to support me and hear more from me, then do check out my Patreon. I will put the link below. I hope you found this reading helpful, and I wish you many blessings on your path.